I used to think life was about fitting in, about keeping quiet when the world told you who you should be. For years I followed that script, smiling when I was supposed to, laughing at things that didn't make me laugh, wearing what people said looked right on me. I remember looking in the mirror every morning and seeing a face that felt borrowed, like I was wearing someone else's life. And for the longest time, I told myself that was normal, that everyone probably felt that way. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. I knew I was hiding. The turning point came one evening in late November. The sky was grey, the kind of color that makes the city look like it's holding its breath. I was walking home from work, coat zipped to my chin, head down, just trying to disappear into the crowd. I stopped by a small clothing boutique I passed every day but never dared to enter. The window was dressed with mannequins in soft sweaters, long skirts, and scarves that looked like they were made of clouds. I remember one particular outfit, simple, yet beautiful. Something about it felt like freedom. I stood there for almost 10 minutes before the shopkeeper waved and smiled through the glass. I panicked and walked away, heart racing like I'd done something wrong. But that feeling, that heartbeat of recognition, wouldn't go away. For the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I'd see the reflection of those colors in puddles, dream about the feel of that soft fabric against my skin, and wonder why I was so afraid of something so simple. It wasn't about the clothes. It was about me. I wanted to feel like myself for once, not the version people expected, not the person who played it safe, but the one buried under years of pretending. One Saturday morning, when the world was still quiet, I finally walked back into that shop. The bell above the door jingled, and I froze for a second, almost turning back. But the woman behind the counter smiled kindly. "Take your time," she said, as if she already knew what I was there for. I wandered between racks, touching fabrics, breathing in the scent of something new yet familiar. My hands trembled when I picked up a light blue dress. It wasn't extravagant, just soft, simple, honest. The kind of thing that didn't ask for attention but still had a quiet confidence. I took it to the fitting room, my heart pounding so loud I thought she could hear it. As I closed the curtain, I stared at myself in the mirror, my face nervous, my hands shaking. I hesitated for a long moment. And then I tried it on. The moment the fabric slipped over my shoulders, something shifted inside me. It felt like silence breaking, like I could finally exhale after years of holding my breath. I looked up, and for the first time, I saw someone I recognized. Not a stranger. Not a mask. Just me. I stood there for what felt like forever, tears blurring my reflection. It wasn't joy or sadness exactly, it was relief. The kind that comes when you stop running. When I stepped out, the shopkeeper looked up and smiled softly. "You look like yourself," she said. And that one sentence undid me. I couldn't even speak. I just nodded, wiping my face as quietly as I could. I bought the dress and carried it home like it was something sacred. But reality wasn't as kind. When I wore it again at home, standing in front of my own mirror, I knew this wouldn't be easy. I could already hear the voices in my head, the things people would say, the judgments, the whispers. I thought about my family, my friends, my co-workers. Would they understand? Would they think I'd lost my mind? I almost folded it away in a box, pretending the moment never happened. But then I caught my reflection again, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't go back. The first person I told was my sister. She's always been the brave one, the one who never cared what people thought. I called her and asked if I could come over. She must have heard something in my voice, because when she opened the door and saw me standing there in that dress, she didn't laugh or look shocked. She just pulled me into a hug. "About time," she whispered. I broke down right there in her doorway, all the fear, all the guilt, everything I'd been carrying for years spilling out. We talked for hours that night. I told her about how I'd felt for so long, trapped, silent, invisible. She listened without interrupting, her hand on mine, eyes filled with something I hadn't felt from anyone in a long time, understanding. Before I left, she said something I'll never forget. "You don't need anyone's permission to be happy." Those words hit me like a truth I'd been too scared to say out loud. That night, I stood in front of the mirror again, the city lights flickering through the window. I thought about all the times I'd hidden, all the smiles I'd faked, all the years I'd lost trying to please everyone but myself. I realized that being me wasn't something I had to earn or explain. It was something I already was. And for the first time, I smiled not because I had to, but because I meant it. The days that followed weren't perfect. People noticed the change. Some smiled, some whispered, some didn't know what to say. I learned to be okay with that. I started walking with my head up, even when I felt nervous. I began to discover that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's moving forward despite it. One morning, as I walked to work in a simple blouse and jeans that finally felt like mine, an older woman at the cafe I stopped at every day smiled at me. "You look lovely today," she said. It was such a small thing, but it meant everything. For the first time in so long, I didn't shrink or hide. I just said, "Thank you," and I meant it. My co-workers eventually adjusted too. At first, there were awkward pauses, polite questions, the kind that try too hard to sound casual. But then something beautiful happened. They stopped seeing me as someone who changed, and started seeing me as someone who finally arrived. My boss, a quiet man who rarely said much, caught me by surprise one afternoon. "You seem happier these days," he said. I smiled and replied, "I am." He nodded, and that was that. As time passed, I started to realize that people were not as cruel as I had imagined. Most of the fear had been inside me. Sure, not everyone understood, but that was okay. I wasn't doing this for approval anymore. I was doing it for peace. For authenticity. For the kid inside me who used to stare at mirrors and wonder who was looking back. The biggest test came months later when I visited my parents. I hadn't told them much yet. My heart was pounding as I stood outside their house, clutching the same blue dress that started it all. When my mother opened the door, there was a long silence. Her eyes softened as she looked at me. Then she stepped forward and held me tight. No words, no questions, just love. My father was quieter, hesitant at first, but eventually he joined the hug. In that moment, all the fear melted away. They didn't need to understand everything to love me. They just needed to see I was finally happy. I think about that day often. The way the light filtered through the kitchen curtains while my mother made tea, the way laughter slowly replaced the tension. It felt like coming home not just to them, but to myself. I finally realized that I didn't have to wait for the world to accept me before I accepted myself. Now, when I look in the mirror, I don't see a stranger anymore. I see someone who fought to be here. Someone who stopped apologizing for existing. My life didn't suddenly become perfect. There are still moments of doubt, of fear, of old habits whispering that I should shrink again. But I've learned to talk back to that voice. I tell it, no. I'm not hiding anymore. Sometimes, I still visit that boutique. The same shopkeeper greets me every time, always with that same warm smile. We talk about life, about courage, about how sometimes the smallest decisions like walking into a store can change everything. I wear that blue dress on days when I need reminding. It's not just fabric and thread, it's a symbol of the moment I chose to stop living by permission. A reminder that identity isn't something to be granted, it's something you claim. If I could tell my younger self anything, I'd say this: you don't need anyone to validate who you are. You don't need to wait until people are ready to accept you. Because the moment you decide to be honest with yourself, the world starts to shift in ways you never imagined. You start to meet people who see you, really see you. And even if not everyone does, it's okay. You're not living for their approval. You're living for your truth. I realized I don't need permission to be me. Not anymore. And maybe, just maybe, that realization was the beginning of everything I was always meant to be. After that first step, everything seemed different. The air felt sharper, the colors brighter, like the world itself was noticing I had stopped hiding. I began experimenting slowly, not with grand gestures, but small acts that reminded me I belonged in my own skin. A scarf here, a sweater there, subtle changes that felt like gentle declarations. I exist, I matter, I am allowed to be seen. The more I embraced those moments, the more my confidence grew. It wasn't instant or magical, it was quiet, cumulative, like layers of fear slowly peeling away. One day, I decided to join a local art class. Painting had always been a secret love, something I'd abandoned because it seemed frivolous, something I didn't have time for. But now, I craved it. As I walked into the sunlit room, the scent of paint and clay instantly grounded me. People were chatting, laughing, sharing brushes and ideas. I felt nervous, the familiar knot of judgment tightening in my stomach. But then I reminded myself of something my sister said: "You don't need permission to be happy." So I stepped forward, set down my bag, and introduced myself. The first hour was tentative. My hands shook as I tried to mix colors, afraid of making mistakes in front of others. But as I watched the paint blend and swirl on the canvas, I felt a thrill I hadn't known in years. I looked around and saw people laughing at mistakes, sharing ideas, encouraging each other, not judging. The realization hit me like a splash of sunlight: this is what life feels like when you show up as yourself. Not perfect, not polished, not anyone else's version of you. Just you. That evening, I walked home with paint smudges on my fingers and a nervous, excited energy buzzing through me. I realized I was learning something profound. Courage wasn't just standing in a mirror wearing a dress. It was allowing myself to participate in life fully, without fear of being too much or too different. Every small choice, the colors I wore, the art I created, the words I spoke, became a declaration that I would no longer shrink for anyone. The next challenge came when my closest friend, someone I'd known since childhood, noticed the changes in me. We met for coffee at a little cafe that smelled of roasted beans and cinnamon. I sat down, heart hammering, unsure how to start. Finally, I just said it: "I've been trying to be me lately. Not the person everyone expects, but me." He looked at me for a long moment. His expression shifted from surprise to something softer, something I hadn't dared to hope for: understanding. "I'm glad," he said quietly. "I didn't realize you felt trapped. But I see you now." And just like that, the tension that had been knotting my chest for years loosened a fraction. It was a small gesture, a simple sentence, but it felt like validation without needing anyone's permission, proof that truth has a way of resonating when you dare to speak it. I started noticing changes in how I interacted with the world. Walking down the street, I caught myself holding my head higher, smiling at strangers, exchanging small gestures of connection. People began to respond differently too, some with warmth, others with hesitation, but it no longer scared me. I had discovered a secret: the fear we carry about being judged often far outweighs the reality. Most people are too wrapped up in their own lives to scrutinize ours, and those who do matter will adjust or accept because they care about us, not their preconceptions. One afternoon, I received an invitation to speak at a small community event about personal growth and authenticity. My first instinct was panic. The thought of talking about my journey in front of strangers made my stomach twist. But something inside me whispered, as it had countless times since that first dress: "You are allowed to be seen." I accepted. The night of the event, I stood on a modest stage in a community hall, facing an audience I didn't know. My hands trembled slightly, but I reminded myself to breathe, to honor the courage that had brought me here. I spoke about fear, hiding, and the quiet relief of finally embracing who I am. I spoke about the first time I tried on that blue dress, the tears, the freedom. I spoke about art, friendships, and the importance of small acts of courage. By the time I finished, the room was quiet for a moment, then filled with applause, not for perfection, not for spectacle, but for honesty. People came up to me afterward, sharing their own struggles, their own discoveries. I realized then that sharing your truth doesn't just free you, it gives others permission to find themselves too. Life continued to challenge me, of course. Some days, the old anxieties returned. A glance, a whisper, or a misjudged comment could make the old doubts flare up. But now I had tools I didn't before: self-compassion, courage, and the knowledge that my value didn't depend on universal approval. I learned to talk to myself gently, to remind myself that discomfort doesn't equal failure, and that authenticity is always worth the risk. The most profound change, though, was internal. I stopped waiting for permission. I stopped holding my breath for someone to approve of me. I stopped apologizing for existing the way I naturally do. And in that space of quiet rebellion against fear, I found a deeper peace than I'd ever known. It was subtle at first: a sense of calm while walking through a crowded street, a laugh that came from genuine joy, a moment of connection with a stranger. But over time, it became a constant hum. I am here. I belong. I am enough. Months later, I returned to that boutique, the place that had sparked this whole journey. The shopkeeper recognized me instantly, her eyes twinkling with familiarity. We spoke briefly, about life, about courage, about how small choices can transform everything. I tried on a new outfit that day, something bolder than the first dress, and I looked in the mirror. I didn't see fear. I didn't see doubt. I saw someone who had lived through hesitation and emerged whole, someone who had learned the most important lesson of all: you don't need anyone's permission to be yourself. Now, I walk through life differently. I notice the small joys, the quiet moments, the laughter that bubbles up without effort. I allow myself to take risks, to speak honestly, to engage fully with the world. I still face fear, of course it never fully disappears, but I face it with a companion I didn't have before: certainty in my own worth. Sometimes, when I think about the old me, the one who hid behind borrowed masks and quiet smiles, I feel a twinge of sadness for the years lost. But mostly, I feel gratitude. Gratitude for the courage to try, for the people who held space for me, and for the world that, despite its noise and judgment, has a way of reflecting back the truth when you dare to show up. I realized I don't need permission to be me, and in that realization, I found freedom. Freedom to love myself, to connect authentically, to pursue joy without hesitation. Freedom to wake up every morning and look in the mirror, smile genuinely, and say, "Here I am. All of me." Unapologetically. And somehow, in choosing myself, I discovered a love and acceptance that I had been seeking my entire life. Not from others, but from the only person who truly matters, me. The months that followed felt like a rebirth. Every morning, I woke up and made choices that reflected the person I had finally allowed myself to be. Sometimes it was small: picking a scarf that felt like me, taking a longer route home because the sunlight fell just right on the streets, choosing to laugh fully at a joke without worrying about looking foolish. Other times, it was bigger: speaking up in meetings, sharing my art publicly, inviting someone into my life honestly and without pretense. Each choice, no matter how small, reinforced a truth I had fought so long to admit: I didn't need anyone's permission. One chilly evening, I attended a friend's wedding. I wore a simple, elegant dress, the kind that made me feel poised yet comfortable, like the fabric itself whispered encouragement. I arrived early, the hall dimly lit with candles and soft music, my heart fluttering with nerves and excitement. For the first time, I noticed how much my perspective had shifted. I wasn't worried about judgment. I didn't feel like I needed to explain myself or hide. I simply existed, present, and alive in my own skin. People approached me throughout the evening: some friends, some acquaintances, some strangers complimenting my outfit, my smile, my energy. Each interaction was a tiny confirmation of a lesson I had learned: authenticity draws connection. It doesn't guarantee universal approval, but it guarantees a kind of peace that pretense never could. And as I laughed and danced under the warm glow of chandeliers, I realized that happiness, genuine happiness, feels effortless when it's earned through truth rather than conformity. Later that night, I stepped outside to catch some air. The sky was clear, sprinkled with stars, and the cold wind felt exhilarating against my face. I took a deep breath and let myself reflect on the journey that had brought me here: the fear, the hesitation, the first trembling steps into that boutique, the tearful conversations with my sister, the nervous but liberating art class, the courage to speak my truth publicly. Every moment had been a building block, shaping someone who finally stood confidently in their own identity. I thought about the people I had lost along the way: the friends who couldn't understand, the colleagues who still whispered, the strangers who judged. And I felt nothing but compassion. Their inability to see me fully didn't diminish my truth, it only highlighted how vital it was to keep claiming it. I realized that living authentically wasn't about convincing everyone else to accept me. It was about honoring myself. And in that honoring, I found a profound serenity. A gentle knock on the balcony door pulled me from my thoughts. It was my sister, holding 2 cups of tea, smiling as she always did. She came out and handed me one, wrapping me in a hug that was both familiar and deeply comforting. "You've come a long way," she said softly. I leaned into her shoulder, letting myself absorb the warmth, the acceptance, the unwavering love. I know, I replied, voice thick. And I'm not done yet. That night, I walked home under the stars, the city lights reflecting in puddles from an earlier drizzle. Each step felt deliberate, grounded, intentional. I realized that embracing who I am isn't a single act, it's a continuous process, a daily reaffirmation that my existence matters exactly as it is. And with each step, I felt more connected not just to myself, but to the world around me. I noticed strangers smiling at me in passing, the way a musician's notes lingered on the street corner, the quiet kindness in a neighbor's greeting. Life felt infinitely richer because I no longer filtered it through fear. I began sharing my journey publicly, not for attention, but to reach anyone silently struggling with identity, self-expression, or acceptance. I spoke about the fears, the shame, the tiny victories that gradually built into courage. The response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from people who had felt invisible, unheard, or trapped by expectations. Some shared their own stories, others simply thanked me for giving them permission to be themselves. And in helping others find their courage, I discovered that my own joy deepened, that authenticity is contagious, and that living fully is a gift not just to oneself, but to everyone around you. One afternoon, I received a letter from a young person who had been inspired to embrace their true self after reading about my experience. They wrote about hiding for years, about feeling afraid of rejection, about discovering the first flicker of freedom in small, brave acts. Their words made my chest tighten and my eyes water. I realized then that this journey wasn't just mine, it was part of something larger, a ripple effect of courage and self-acceptance that could spread far beyond me. Standing in front of the mirror later that evening, I smiled. The reflection staring back was not someone I was pretending to be. It was fully, unmistakably me. And for the first time in my life, that felt enough. No apologies, no justifications, no waiting for approval. I had claimed my life, my identity, my joy. I had stepped out from the shadows of fear and into the sunlight of authenticity. And in that moment, I whispered to myself, a quiet vow that carried the weight of every struggle and triumph: I don't need permission to be me. Not now, not ever. I am worthy. I am whole. I am free. The world continues to move around me, as it always does, unpredictable and unrelenting. But I face it differently now. With every choice I make, every smile I share, every moment I embrace, I honor the truth that brought me here. And I know, without doubt, that this freedom, this courage, this peace is mine to keep, for the rest of my life. No more hiding. No more silence. No more fear. Just life, lived fully, authentically, unapologetically. I finally understand that being yourself is not a one-time act, it's a lifetime of choosing honesty, love, and acceptance. And in that choice, I have found everything I was searching for and more.